Have you ever heard of a prosecutor writing an impeachment report? Now, what's the problem with a prosecutor writing an impeachment report? That means the prosecutor is using the criminal justice system for political purposes. He's using the criminal justice system to influence a process, a political process, a constitutional process at bottom, but yes, in the House of Representatives. So if he can't actually indict a sitting president's not your average citizen, folks. He wouldn't even be in this position but for the fact he is president and he got elected president. So let's not say, I hear the left say, well, is he above the law? No, he's not above the law, but he has to protect the office of the president. He has to protect his presidency. And he has to protect and preserve the Constitution. That's his oath. It's Mr. Mueller, despite what you hear from the left and the media, who is upending our constitutional system. It's Mr. Rosenstein who's doing it. They're bulls in China shop, and they have no comprehension of the bigger picture here. They think they're investigating a bank robbery. But it's not just them, it's the media, either knowingly stupid or actually stupid. I was watching some of this Meet the Press. I had to shut it off after an exchange with Chuck Todd and Rudy Giuliani. And then you could see the other media picking up on it. The stupidity displayed by Chuck Todd, I believe it's an honest stupidity, and his political ideology, gained from years as working as a staff assistant to Tom Harkin, one of the left-wing kook senators, you may recall, who retired from Iowa, and his wife being a leftist. It's obvious the guy is not capable of getting beyond his ideology, and most in the media are not. Rudy Giuliani is an advocate. He's a private lawyer, represents the president. Chuck Todd is an advocate who pretends to be a journalist. Now listen to this exchange. You've been hearing it, I'm sure, all day long, and people mocking it. Rudy misspoke. Rudy didn't misspeak. I'll put a fine point on exactly what he said. Cut 11, go.
Don't tell me that we're delaying this if they're spending a week and a half getting back to us. I don't know why they're doing that, but they're sure as heck not showing any desire to expedite it. I can't get them to write a letter faster than they have. And if you want to start counting up the time that we have taken to draft the letter.
You believe this is on them, that you would have, that you guys have not delayed the interviewing, delayed the negotiations.
Yes, each time by 3 or 4 days so we could write a letter in response. They have taken 2 to 3 weeks to get back to us. So what I have to tell you is, look, I'm not going to be rushed into having him testify so that he gets trapped into perjury. And when you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Now stop here. This is where Chuck Todd thinks he has a headline. What? It's not the truth. It's his version of the truth? Didn't Kellyanne Conway say something like that months ago? Wow. Now I can spotlight myself. Go ahead.
Truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't...
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
No.
This is going to become a bad meme.
Don't do this to me.
Don't do truth isn't truth to me.
Donald Trump says, I didn't talk about Flynn with Comey. Comey says, you did talk about it. So tell me what the truth is.
Don McGahn might
if
know.
you're such a genius, Don McGahn doesn't know. That's the situation.
Okay.
We have 2 pieces of evidence. Trump says, I didn't tell him, and the other guy says that he did say it. Which is the truth? Maybe you know right. Because you're
Under
a genius.
2 people, I know you're right. I don't read minds on that front.
All right, let's stop because it gets dumber on Chuck Todd's part as we go on. Let me give you a perfect example. This happens, over a year ago, that Comey was fired. So Comey tells his dear friend, Mueller, remember, Comey was Deputy Attorney General when Mueller was FBI Director. They go way, way back. One of them has one of their kids as the godson or daughter of the other, which is a preposterous fact to begin with. So Comey tells Mueller, no, he fired me for this reason. This is what he told me. Now we got McGahn in here now. McGahn says, no, he told me this. Trump, I was there. Trump says, here's my recollection. This is what I remember. So there's three of them. Maybe they have three different recollections. He's not going to punish Comey. McGahn's been talking to him for 30 hours. The only guy that hasn't talked to him is Trump because he's trying to defend the office of the presidency. And then he says, okay, obstruction of justice. This one tells me this. This one tells me this. We believe the President of the United States is dissembling. That's exactly what's meant, Chuck Todd, and you know damn well what Rudy Giuliani was talking about. And by the way, let's assume for the moment all three of them really believe that's their recollection. That's the truth. And there's three different versions. It's like witnesses to a car accident. Sometimes you get A, sometimes you get B. That's why you need multiple witnesses. You know, so that's what is meant in this context. Who remembers what and how they remember it. And the reason it's a really, really big deal is because a prosecutor who is hostile to a particular individual will not want to believe that individual and will try and make the case that it is that individual who is dissembling, who's lying or deceiving. Just like Mueller and his people decided they didn't want Gates so much, they wanted Manafort. Gates, a proven liar, thief. They charge him with 105 years' worth of crimes, but they charge Manafort with 300 years' worth of crimes. Gates, in the meantime, they plead him down to 2-0, where he may not serve 1 day in prison, in order to get his testimony against Manafort. Now, this is what prosecutors do. Giuliani was a U.S. attorney and a damn good one. This is what he's talking about. Let's hold on a second here. Bob Mueller is not God. Bob Mueller is not pure. Bob Mueller is not a judge. A judge has a completely different role. Bob Mueller is a prosecutor. He's looking for people to put in prison. That shouldn't be the role of all prosecutors. They're supposed to try and pursue the truth. But that's clearly not the case with Mr. Mueller. If Mr. Mueller was trying to find the truth, he'd already concluded there was no collusion between Trump and Trump World and the Russians that interfered with the election. Got a couple outlier conversations and so forth, but it's not illegal. It's not criminal to talk to Russians, even during the course of a campaign. It's not criminal to want to talk to them if they think they have information, but information hasn't passed. There's no evidence that there was any, in fact, collusion. And the operation closes. But that's not what he's doing. That's not what he's doing. Now, Giuliani says they have 1.4 million documents. Do you know how many documents that is? Do you know what that looks like, 1.4 million documents? That they've interviewed over 24 White House staffers, including McGahn, President's counsel. We've had endless congressional hearings with Democrats on the committees. Nothing has leaked to create a criminal connection of any kind to the President of the United States or anyone around the President of the United States. If there were a smoking gun, it would have leaked by now. And you have thousands of so-called journalists who are taking leaks from partisans, who are taking leaks from law enforcement, leaks from the intelligence agencies, digging on their own, they've come up empty. Now, this is what's meant by a perjury trap. Mr. Mueller doesn't want to interview the president because he's actually interested in gleaning some information he can't get elsewhere. He wants to interview the president in order to catch a conflict of memories, if you will. Now, let me tell you something. If the president's current lawyers are competent, and they appear to be, and Mr. Mueller triggers the issuance of a subpoena, they can lay out the case, chapter and verse, for the court. That a subpoena to compel a president to sit for a perjury trap simply cannot fly under our Constitution. They can't say they're not getting documents. They're getting a zillion documents. They can't say they're not getting access to people with knowledge. They're getting access to all kinds of people. But you can't demand the appearance of the President of the United States for an interview or a grand jury appearance. Some people say period. And then have really no basis to do so other than to try and trick the President of the United States. I have to believe there's enough good judges left, certainly on the Supreme Court, to understand the insidious nature of this. A couple other points I'd like to make. And I've made them before, but it's time to underscore them. What's to stop any of the over 90 United States attorneys in this country from issuing a subpoena for the president to testify on such limp and minor reasons, if Mr. Mueller can get away with it? And I want you to think about this. You're a really smart audience. That's why I'm getting into the weeds here. The argument is that Mr. Mueller is not a principal appointee. Therefore, he didn't have to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate in order to serve in his slot. Therefore, he's a constitutional appointment, they're saying, because he reports to a person who had to be confirmed by the Senate, Rosenstein. Great. But the United States attorneys in this country, over 90 of them, all had to go through that process. They had to be nominated by this president and confirmed by the United States Senate. They are principals. They are more senior. They have more power, the argument goes, than Mr. Mueller. Well, if Mr. Mueller can issue or have issued a subpoena against the President of the United States to appear in person to give testimony, then what's to stop those principal prosecutors who are at least theoretically under our Constitution? If you listen to Judge Napolitano and the others, if they're more senior, the U.S. attorneys, they're principal appointees, officials, then Mr. Mueller, and Mr. Mueller can have a subpoena issued, then what's to stop the U.S. attorney in Rhode Island from doing the same thing if he thinks he has a case? Not a case against the president. We just want to know, what would stop the U.S. attorney in New York, for God's sakes? Nothing. Nothing. Oh, and one other point. If the potential exists that a prosecutor will be free to question a president of the United States about the firing of a subordinate, CIA director, FBI director, the attorney general, the secretary of agriculture, whatever, and they assert that it was done for some nefarious reason, what's to stop them from politically blackmailing a president? In the confines of the Oval Office, you can hear the discussion. President says to the CIA director, I'm not happy with your work. I'm going to replace you. Well, you better not do that, Mr. President, says the CIA director, because I'm going to tell the U.S. attorney that you threatened me, that you demanded that I do X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, but that's not true. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He can question your motives. He can question you. And I'm going to drag down your administration for the next 12 months. I'm going to help trigger an investigation. What do you think of that? I am gravely concerned about what's being done here to the office of the presidency, to the Constitution of the United States. I'm gravely concerned that the president's early private lawyers were incompetent or foolish. I'm gravely concerned about what's going on with the White House counsel. I'm gravely concerned that we have an out-of-control prosecutor who has as his purpose, Constitution be damned, to write an impeachment report to take down this president, and he hopes, maybe, to drag it through the courts. Maybe he'll get lucky, he figures. I'm gravely concerned about this president and future presidents. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.